My husband introduced his pregnant secretary at our 10th anniversary gala. Then I revealed how he paid for her nursery. I came home early from Chicago with my husband's favorite fudge in my suitcase and a speech in my head for our 10th anniversary gala. Instead, I stood outside his office door and heard him tell his pregnant secretary that his wife still did not know they were already divorced. That sentence was the kind of thing the body hears before the mind agrees to understand. I remember the hallway first, not his voice, not her laugh, the hallway, the polished black marble outside the executive wing, the blue security lights under the baseboards, the framed magazine covers on the wall, each of them pretending Julian Cross had built the company beside me instead of standing beautifully in photographs while I carried the weight behind closed doors. My heels were quiet because the building was almost empty. Most of the staff had gone home to rest before the gala. The whole company was supposed to be celebrating 10 years of Marlowe Meridian and 10 years of my marriage, and I had returned a day early because I still believed surprises could be sweet. The fudge box was wrapped in brown paper and tied with red twine. Julian loved that shop in Chicago. We had found it by accident on our first anniversary, back when we were still staying in cheap hotels and pretending room service was too fancy for us. He had fed me a square of salted caramel fudge in the rain and said, "One day, Elena, I'm going to give you a life where you never have to check a bank balance before ordering dessert." At the time, he had no job, no plan, and exactly $87 in his checking account. I was the one with the dream, the contacts, the stubbornness, and the brownstone my mother left me in Brooklyn. But I loved the way he looked at my ambition as if it were a fire he wanted to warm his hands beside, not a flame he needed to put out. So, when my meetings in Chicago ended early, I changed my flight. I did not text him. I did not tell my assistant to tell his assistant. I bought his fudge, wrote half of my gala toast on the plane, and imagined walking into his office while he was bent over spreadsheets, tired and handsome and still mine. I imagined him looking up in surprise, laughing, pulling me into his arms and saying I had saved him from another lonely night before the most important public celebration of our lives. The receptionist saw me first. Her name was Maisie, and she was 24, earnest, and terrible at lying. The moment I stepped through the glass doors of Marlowe Meridian's lobby, her face went pale. "Mrs. Cross," she said, standing too fast and knocking her pen off the desk. I smiled because I was still a fool. "It's Elena, Maisie. You look like you saw a ghost. I thought you were coming back tomorrow." That was the plan. I lifted the box. "I finished early. Is Julian upstairs?" Her eyes flicked toward the private elevator. 1 second. Not even one full second. But when you build a company from nothing, you learn to read a room before anyone says a word. You learn which suppliers are overcharging from the way they smile. You learn which bankers are nervous from the way they touch their watches. You learn which employees are hiding something from the way their eyes betray their mouths. "He is," she said. "I think he's with Miss Vale." Bianca Vale, Julian's personal secretary. 27, soft-spoken in meetings, sharp-eyed when she thought no one was watching. She wore ivory blouses and delicate gold necklaces. She sent Julian's calendar invites, screened his calls, fetched his coffee, sat beside him on flights when I was working in another city, and somehow always managed to disappear 5 minutes before I entered any room. I had once asked Julian if she was too close to him. He kissed my forehead and told me grief had made me suspicious of women who still had lightness in them. "Is everything all right?" I asked Maisie. "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Everything is fine." Everything was not fine. But I was still thinking like a wife, not a chairwoman. I told myself, Maybe there was an emergency with the Gala seating chart. Maybe Bianca had cried about some florist crisis. Maybe Maisie was simply startled because the founder had appeared unannounced at 8:30 at night. I told myself 3 different gentle lies in the space between the lobby and the elevator, because love trains you to protect the person hurting you until the evidence becomes too heavy to carry. The private elevator opened to the executive floor. The lights were dim, the city outside the windows glittering like broken glass. To the left were my offices, understated and practical. To the right was Julian's suite, the one a glossy business magazine had called the command center of modern development leadership. I had laughed when I read that. Julian had not. He had framed the article. His door was not fully closed. That was what saved me. Or ruined me. Maybe both. There was a thin wedge of warm light spilling across the carpet. I heard Bianca first, her laugh low and intimate, not the brittle professional laugh women use around powerful men. Then I heard Julian's voice, the voice he used when he was not performing for investors. It was softer, lazier, almost smug. "Are you still afraid she'll find out?" Bianca asked. I stopped. My hand tightened around the fudge box. The paper crackled, loud in the silent hall. I should have turned and walked away. I should have called Adrian Holt, my attorney, right then without listening to one more syllable. But betrayal has a gravitational pull. It drags you closer even when every instinct tells you to run. I stepped toward the door until I could see through the opening. Julian's shirt was unbuttoned at the throat. His jacket was tossed across the back of the sofa. Bianca stood in front of him, close enough that her knee touched his. She was not wearing the ivory blouse she had worn that morning in the photos Nora Ellis sent me from the gala setup. She had on a pale pink maternity dress that clung to the curve of her stomach. Pregnant. It took me a moment to believe the shape. My mind tried to explain it away as fabric, posture, shadow. Then Julian placed his hand on her belly with a tenderness I had not felt from him in years, and Bianca covered his hand with hers. "After tomorrow night, none of it will matter," he said. "Elena still thinks she's Mrs. Cross. She doesn't know the divorce papers are already handled." The words hit me without sound. I did not gasp. I did not move. Inside my chest, something ancient and trusting split open. We were not divorced. We had not separated. No papers existed, not real ones. I had never signed anything, never been served, never sat across from him with attorneys between us. We had shared coffee 3 mornings before. He had kissed my cheek in our kitchen. He had told me not to overwork in Chicago because tomorrow night was our night. I knew enough law, enough corporate structure, enough signatures and filings and jurisdiction to know a divorce could not be handled without me. So, if Julian believed it was handled, he had either forged something, staged something, or convinced Bianca that legal reality was as bendable as his wedding vows. Bianca tilted her head. "You promise she can't stop it?" "Elena can stop a storm if she thinks there's a contract inside it," Julian said, and Bianca laughed. "But she can't stop what everyone sees. Once the board, the investors, the press, and our families hear it from me, she'll look unstable if she fights. Grief has made her unpredictable. People already know that." My fingers dug into the fudge box until the cardboard buckled. Grief. He said the word as if it were a medical flaw, as if it were a weakness in my balance sheet, as if it were not the small white hospital room where I had held his hand while blood soaked through the sheets and the doctor's face told me our baby was gone, before anyone had the mercy to say it out loud. Bianca asked, "And the name, you're sure?" Julian smiled. "God help me," he smiled. "Grace belongs to a baby who actually made it." The box fell from my hand, but I caught it against my hip before it hit the floor. One corner crushed. The twine slipped loose. I could smell chocolate, sugar, and salt. Grace. That was the name we chose 3 years earlier, before we knew whether our baby was a girl or a boy. Before we learned that some dreams are too fragile to survive stress, blood pressure, emergency flights, and a company crisis that demanded me on conference calls while my body was begging me to lie still. Grace was not a name on a list. Grace was a whispered promise in bed. Grace was Julian's palm on my stomach. Grace was the tiny bracelet I ordered too early because hope makes you reckless. Grace was a folded ultrasound in a memory box I could not open without shaking. And he had put that name in another woman's nursery. For one wild second, I saw myself throwing open the door. I saw Bianca stumble backward. I saw Julian's face drain of color. I saw myself slap him so hard the frame magazine cover behind his desk shattered from the force of it. I saw myself screaming until the whole floor heard what he had done. I wanted the animal satisfaction of his shock. I wanted to watch his lie collapse while he was still touching the proof of it. But then Julian said, "The gala will be perfect. Nora thinks she's coordinating an anniversary celebration. By the time Elena realizes the program changed, she'll already be sitting under the lights." The rage inside me became cold, not smaller, colder, because an affair can be impulsive. A pregnancy can be reckless. Cruel words can spill out in private and still be unforgivable. But a gala program does not change itself. A board presentation does not appear by accident. A false divorce story, a public pregnancy reveal, a leadership transition, a stolen baby name, all of it arranged for the same night I thought we were honoring our marriage. That was strategy. And Julian had forgotten who taught him strategy. I stepped back from the door. 1 inch, then another. I made no sound. I carried the crushed fudge box to the emergency stairwell at the end of the hall, pushed through the metal door, and only then allowed my knees to bend. The stairwell smelled like concrete dust and lemon cleaner. My breath came in short, sharp pulls. I pressed the box against my chest like it was something alive. I did not cry. Not yet. There are moments so painful the body refuses tears, because tears would make the moment real. I called Adrian Holt. He answered on the second ring. "Elena, are you back in New York?" "Activate the protective trust," I said. There was a pause. Adrian had been my attorney for 12 years. He knew the clauses, the shell structures, the emergency voting rights, the safeguards he had insisted on when I was young enough and in love enough to think protecting myself from my husband sounded like an insult. "Elena," he said carefully, "is this a hypothetical conversation?" "No." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Has Julian attempted to alter your equity position?" "He intends to. Tomorrow night, publicly." Another pause. Not shock, calculation. Adrian was not a dramatic man. He was the kind of attorney who considered panic a waste of billable oxygen. "Tell me only what I need for immediate action," he said. I looked down at the crushed box. "He has Bianca pregnant. He told her the divorce papers are already handled. He plans to announce her and the baby at the gala tomorrow and frame me as emotionally unstable. He may try to restrict my board authority. He thinks I do not know." "And your 59%? "Lock it down tonight, quietly, legally, before Julian knows I heard him." The sound on the other end changed, papers moving, a chair scraping. Adrian had stood up. "The trust trigger can be activated on your instruction as controlling shareholder, Sug," he said. "Once activated, Julian cannot dilute your voting rights, cannot interfere with the trust's voting block, cannot transfer executive authority over your shares, and cannot use emergency corporate measures against you without independent review. His gifted shares are also subject to misconduct review if company misuse, fraud, reputational sabotage, or marital deception tied to corporate action can be shown." "It can. Do not confront him tonight." "I already chose not to." "Good. Do not go home if he expects you there. Do not access company systems from unsecured devices. Do not send emotional texts. Do not threaten. Do not warn. Preserve everything." I want Owen on digital preservation. I will call him through counsel. Celeste, too, quietly. I'll bring her in under audit privilege. My throat tightened at the efficiency of it. There was something merciful about legal language. It gave shape to pain. It turned betrayal into folders, instructions, procedures, dates, logs. It made the wound actionable. Adrian, I said. Yes? He named the baby Grace. Silence. Adrian had been there after the miscarriage. Not in the room, not with family intimacy, but in the practical aftermath. He had moved board meetings, postponed filings, handled the contract crisis, and once, without comment, sent white tulips to the hospital because he knew I hated lilies. When he spoke again, his voice was different, still controlled, softer. I am very sorry. I don't want sorry, I want ready. Then we will be ready. I hung up and stayed in the stairwell for another minute. Behind the wall, somewhere down the hall, my husband was still planning my replacement. In my hands, 10 years of marriage fit inside a crushed box he no longer deserved. I walked out through the service corridor, took the freight elevator down, and left the building without Maisie seeing me. Outside, New York moved as if nothing sacred had been violated. Taxis hissed through puddles. A delivery cyclist cursed at a bus. People laughed under awnings, holding paper cups and phones in each other's hands. I stood on the sidewalk and understood something that should have terrified me, but instead made me very calm. Julian thought tomorrow night would be the night he replaced me. He had no idea I had already started removing him. I did not build Marlowe Meridian because I wanted to become powerful. I built it because my mother died leaving me a brownstone in Brooklyn and a sentence she had written on the back of an old grocery receipt. Never let love make you homeless. She had been a nurse, a widow, and the kind of woman who could stretch $20 until it looked like a miracle. She bought that brownstone in the 80s when the block still frightened people with nicer shoes. By the time she died, developers were circling the neighborhood like birds of prey. Everyone told me to keep the house, rent it, let it appreciate, let it become the kind of quiet wealth women are supposed to be grateful for. Instead, I sold it. I was 26, furious with grief, and convinced the worst thing I could do with my mother's sacrifice was sit inside it and wait for life to become safe. I used the proceeds to start a small development advisory firm in a rented office above a dentist in downtown Brooklyn. The office smelled like old carpet and mint disinfectant. The windows rattled when trucks passed. The first conference table was a door laid across 2 filing cabinets because I had run out of money after deposits, software, and legal fees. Julian came into my life at exactly the wrong time, which is probably why I let him in so deeply. I met him at a friend's fundraiser where he was volunteering because he had recently lost his job at a boutique hospitality firm and needed somewhere to be that did not look like failure. He wore a navy suit that had been altered twice and still did not sit right on his shoulders. He spilled red wine on his cuff and made a joke before anyone else could pity him. I liked that. I liked the way he looked directly at me when I spoke about zoning, capital stacks, tax credits, and neighborhood development, as if my words were music instead of language. Most men used to interrupt me. He did not have money. He did not have a title. What he had was warmth. At least I thought so. He brought me deli sandwiches at midnight. He sat cross-legged on the office floor, helping me sort proposals. He rubbed my shoulders while I built pitch decks. He told me my mind was the most beautiful room he had ever entered. When I was too tired to believe in myself, he believed loudly enough for both of us. I'm going to spend my life making your sacrifice worth it, he told me one night, looking around the ugly little office with such reverence that I almost cried. You sold your mother's home for this. One day, I want her name in the lobby. I married him 7 months later. People thought I was reckless. Adrian asked me 3 different ways if I wanted a prenuptial agreement. I said no the first time, then yes, after he explained that love and documentation were not enemies. Julian pretended to be offended for half a day, then signed with a smile and said, I don't want your money, Elena. I want your life. At 26, that sounded romantic. The company grew the way a city grows, unevenly, loudly, through dirt and risk and sleepless permits. We took on distressed properties no one else wanted. We advised family owners being bullied by larger developers. We found overlooked buildings and turned them into mixed-use spaces with tenants who could actually survive. I worked 16-hour days. Julian answered phones, charmed clients, held my coat at networking events, and learned the language of business by listening to me speak it. At first, he was proud. Then the articles came. Elena Marlowe, Brooklyn's reluctant development prodigy. The woman turning distress into opportunity. Marlowe Meridian's founder on ethical growth. Founder, visionary, chairwoman. My name kept appearing alone. Julian never complained directly. He would simply go quiet after events where donors congratulated me first. He would smile too hard when reporters asked him to step aside for a solo photo of me. At home, he would say things like, "It's funny how people assume I'm just the husband." Or, "Maybe I should have a title that reflects what I actually do." Or, you know, "Men respect companies differently when a man is visible at the top." I wish I could tell you I saw the danger in those sentences. I did not. I loved him, and love can make a woman mistake a man's insecurity for a wound she is obligated to bandage. So I gave him the CEO title. It was supposed to be symbolic at first. I remained chairwoman and controlling shareholder. Major decisions required my approval. The investors knew where the real authority lived. But publicly, Julian became the face. He was handsome, articulate, charming in that expensive New York way people mistake for competence. He liked the cameras. He liked standing on stages. He liked being introduced before me. Then I transferred a minority share package to him. Adrian objected. I remember sitting in his office while rain blurred the windows and listening to him explain that gifted shares inside a marriage should have conduct protections, clawback provisions, and restrictions tied to misuse or fraud. You are not planning for the husband you love, he said. You are planning for the worst version of any person who may someday have leverage. I was offended. Then I signed anyway because Adrian refused to let me be generous without being protected. Years later, I would owe him more than legal fees could repay. For a while, the arrangement worked. Or I told myself it worked. Julian stood at podiums. I built the deals. He entertained investors. I read the contracts. He appeared in lifestyle magazines beside marble desks and skyline views. I sat with engineers in half-demolished buildings wearing hard hats over hair I had not washed in 2 days. He became the husband other women envied. I became the wife other men found intimidating. Then Grace came. I found out I was pregnant in the bathroom of our old apartment while Julian was downstairs arguing with a contractor over a leak. I took 3 tests because the first 2 felt too impossible. When I told him, he cried. Real tears. Or at least I believed they were real. He dropped to his knees and pressed his face against my stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. We're going to be good at this, he whispered. You and me. We're going to build a person. We chose the name Grace during a thunderstorm. We were in bed. The company was under brutal pressure from a capital partner, threatening to walk on a project that could have killed us. And for once, Julian seemed more interested in the tiny life inside me than the numbers. He said Grace sounded like something neither of us had been given easily, but both of us had fought to deserve. I love that. I ordered a tiny gold bracelet with the name engraved in script. It was foolish. It was too early. But grief had not taught me caution yet. The miscarriage happened during the worst financial crisis of Marlowe Meridian's history. I had been advised to reduce stress. Everyone says that, as if women can simply place stress in a drawer beside spare keys. The company had hundreds of employees by then. Contracts, leases, families, loans, deadlines, city agencies, investors, lawsuits, unions, tenants. A major financing partner tried to retreat after a market shock, and if I did not hold the structure together, years of work would collapse. Julian was in meetings, but I was the one lenders called at midnight. I was the one flying back from Boston with cramps so sharp I had to grip the armrest and pray. By the time I reached the hospital, I already knew. There are silences doctors have before bad news. I learned that silence while Julian stood beside me, looking frightened and helpless, and younger than I had ever seen him. We lost the baby before we could hold her, before we could know for certain whether she was a daughter, before the world recognized that a future had existed and then did not. Afterward, people spoke to me in soft voices. They brought casseroles I did not eat. They told me I was still young, as if a child is a train you can simply catch later. The doctor said another pregnancy might be difficult, maybe dangerous, maybe possible with treatment, maybe not. They used words like future options while I stared at a poster about prenatal vitamins and felt my body become a building after a fire. Julian grieved for a while. He slept with his hand on my stomach. He came to the cemetery when I placed a letter to Grace in my mother's grave, because I did not know where else to put a love that had no body. He promised me we would try again when we were ready. Margaret Cross did not grieve. She assessed. Julian's mother arrived at our apartment wearing pearls and a black coat as if attending the funeral of a social inconvenience. She hugged Julian first, long and theatrically. Then she touched my cheek with fingers cold from outside and said, "You must not blame yourself, Elena. Some women are built for boardrooms, not nurseries." Julian said, "Mother, not don't you dare, not leave, not apologize to my wife, just mother," in that tired tone men use when they want credit for disapproval without the burden of action. Margaret looked at me with pity sharp enough to draw blood. A woman can build a tower and still fail at building a family. I should have cut her out of my life then. Instead, I told myself she was old-fashioned, grieving in her own cruel way, disappointed but harmless. I had just lost a child. I did not have the energy to lose a war with my mother-in-law, too. That was another mistake love teaches women to call peace. Julian changed after Grace, slowly at first. He stayed later at the office. He stopped reaching for me in bed unless he had been drinking. When I mentioned adoption, he said we should not rush into replacing what we lost. When I mentioned fertility specialists, he said he hated seeing me turn my body into another project. When I cried on what would have been my due date, he stood in the doorway and looked at his phone because Bianca needed him to approve travel for a conference. Bianca had started as an executive assistant assigned to the CEO suite after Julian complained that my staff treated him like a guest in his own company. She was efficient, pretty, and eager in the practiced way ambitious young women can be around men who mistake attention for devotion. She laughed at his stories even when I knew the punchlines. She remembered his coffee order, his preferred hotel floors, the names of donors he wanted to impress. I noticed the way Margaret looked at Bianca during company events, as if measuring her hips for legacy. Once, at a holiday dinner, Margaret said, "Bianca has such a gentle spirit. Some women bring calm into a room instead of command." I said, "That must be useful in rooms where no decisions are being made." Julian squeezed my knee under the table, not affectionately, a warning. Later, in the car, he told me I had embarrassed him. "She insulted me," I said. She complimented Bianca. She compared us. You hear attacks everywhere now, he said. That's what grief did to you. That became his favorite weapon. Grief. Not as sorrow, as defect. If I questioned his late nights, grief had made me paranoid. If I disliked Bianca's hand on his sleeve, grief had made me jealous. If I objected to Margaret's comments, grief had made me bitter. If I worked too much, I was avoiding healing. If I worked less, I was fragile. Julian built a cage out of concern and called it marriage. I saw signs. Of course I saw them. Women always see signs before they are ready to survive what the signs mean. Bianca's perfume in his car, a charge from a boutique near her apartment, his phone face down, Margaret's sudden affection for young families. The way Julian stopped saying our apartment felt empty and started saying the city felt suffocating. The way he said Bianca understood how hard it was to be seen only as an extension of someone stronger. I explained all of it away because Grace had already taken one version of the future, and I could not bear to admit my husband was taking the rest. The night I left Julian's office and called Adrian, I went to the condo I kept near the park for late work nights instead of going home. Julian thought I was still in Chicago, and for the first time in years, his ignorance protected me. I placed the crushed fudge box on the kitchen counter. I stared at it until the brown paper blurred. Then I opened the closet. The memory box sat on the top shelf behind winter blankets. It was covered in pale gray linen. Inside were things no one else would recognize as sacred. The ultrasound photo folded in tissue, the hospital bracelet from my own wrist, a card Julian had written when we still believed hope was stronger than statistics, and the tiny gold bracelet engraved with Grace. I did not open it that night. I was afraid if I saw the bracelet, I would stop being cold. I would become only a mother without a child, a wife without a marriage, a woman on the kitchen floor with chocolate melting in a crushed box. So I left the closet closed, washed my face, and sat at my laptop until dawn while Adrian's updates came in one by one. At 1:14 a.m., the Protective Trust activation documents were filed internally and lodged with the appropriate trustee controls. At 2:03 a.m., Julian's unilateral authority over emergency voting mechanisms was suspended pending independent review. At 3:22 a.m., Owen Price, our head of IT, confirmed preservation of executive emails, access logs, deleted draft recoveries, file transfers, and security footage for the prior 18 months. At 4:10 a.m., Celeste Warren, our CFO, acknowledged Council's audit notice and marked several vendor accounts for immediate review. At 6:47 a.m., Adrian called. Your 59% is secure, he said. Julian cannot dilute, transfer, proxy, or suspend your voting power. If he tries to present revised authority tonight, he will be presenting paper with no legal effect. I closed my eyes. Good. There is more. Celeste has concerns she did not feel empowered to raise without you. What kind of concerns? Vendor irregularities, personal expenses disguised as executive functions. She is compiling. For Julian? For the CEO office? Adrian said carefully. And possibly for Miss Vale. I looked toward the clothes closet. Of course. Elena, there is something else. Nora Ellis sent a message to your private account at 5:30. She copied me after I contacted her under privilege. You should read it. Nora was the senior event coordinator for the gala. She had worked with us for years, reliable and discreet, the kind of woman who noticed seating chart politics before they became lawsuits. The email subject was, "You need to see what they added to the gala program." My mouth went dry. Attached was the revised run of show. I did not open it first. Below Nora's message was a private registry link she said had been circulated through Margaret's side of the guest list for celebration gifts after the announcement. The registry name was Grace Cross. For several seconds, I could not move the cursor. Grace Cross. 2 words. A stolen child assembled from my husband's betrayal and my grief. I clicked. Luxury crib in French white lacquer. Organic mattress. Silk canopy. Gold monogrammed blanket. Designer stroller. Hand-painted nursery mural consultation. Crystal lamp shaped like a swan. A tiny bracelet listed as Grandma Margaret's keepsake gift. The thumbnail loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, like a punishment. It was not similar to my bracelet. It was my bracelet. I knew the curve of the G. I knew the little clasp that had been repaired because I had ordered it from a small jeweler who cried with me when I called to say the baby was gone and asked if she could make the chain shorter for a memory box. I knew the faint scratch on the back from the day I dropped it against the bathroom sink because my hands were shaking too hard to put it away. Someone had opened the box where I kept my dead child's name and given it to Bianca's living one. That was when I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. My body simply folded forward, and the sound that came out of me did not feel human. I could survive another woman wearing his shirts. I could survive another woman sitting in his office. I could survive another woman pregnant by my husband. But seeing my daughter's name in that nursery made something in me go silent in a way I cannot fully explain. It was not only grief, it was desecration. I went to the closet. The memory box was not where I had left it. It had been pushed slightly to the side. That detail broke me more than if it had vanished completely. Someone had moved it and expected me not to notice, because people who steal from women's pain always assume pain makes us careless. I opened the lid. The ultrasound photo remained. The hospital bracelet remained. Julian's card remained. The gold bracelet was gone. Only 3 people knew where that box was: me, Julian, and Margaret. Julian had seen me place it there the day I decided I could not keep it on my nightstand anymore. Margaret had found me holding it once, months after the miscarriage, and told me it was unhealthy to worship loss. I had not thought about that moment in years. Now it returned with perfect clarity. Her eyes had lingered on the bracelet the way some people look at heirlooms, not because they are moved by history, but because they are already imagining possession. I wiped my face. I took photos of the box, the empty indentation in the velvet pouch, the old jeweler's receipt, and the ultrasound. I saved screenshots of the registry. I forwarded everything to Adrian with 1 word in the subject line: Grace. Then I created a folder by the same name on an encrypted drive. Into it went the registry, Nora's email, the missing bracelet photos, the old receipt, the private screenshot showing Grandma Margaret's keepsake gift, and the timestamp of every action. The folder did not feel like revenge. It felt like a grave marker. At 9:15 a.m., I drove to Greenwich. Margaret Cross lived in a stone estate with iron gates, clipped hedges, and a circular driveway she liked to describe as old family elegance. Even though the estate had been purchased with my money 6 years earlier, after Julian begged me to help his mother downsize with dignity. Downsizing, in Margaret's vocabulary, meant moving from a large house she could not afford to a larger one she could not afford even more elegantly. I had placed the deed in her name for family peace, but Adrian had insisted on an asset proxy agreement tied to funds I provided. At the time, Julian accused me of humiliating his mother. "Your mother is asking me to buy her a house," I said. "Documentation is not humiliation." Now I thank the younger version of myself for being too tired to argue with Adrian. Margaret's housekeeper let me in with the nervous smile of someone who knew more than she wished. Margaret was in the solarium having tea from a porcelain cup painted with violets. She wore cream silk and pearls. Sunlight made her silver hair look almost holy. "Elena," she said, setting down the cup. "What a surprise! Julian said you were in Chicago." "I came back early." "So dedicated." Her smile did not reach her eyes. "You must be exhausted." Julian worries about how hard you push yourself. I stood across from her and thought of all the years I had accepted that tone, the softness with a blade underneath, the way she could call me ambitious and make it sound like barren, the way she could praise my work and still imply I had failed at the only work that mattered. "Where is Grace's bracelet?" I asked. For 1 second, Margaret's face changed. It was small, but it was there. A flicker of annoyance, not guilt. She was not ashamed, I knew. She was irritated I had interrupted the timing. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Yes, you do." She lifted her cup again, but her hand was no longer steady. "Perhaps you misplaced it. Grief makes people attach meaning to objects and then forget where they put them. You listed it on Bianca's baby registry as Grandma Margaret's keepsake gift." The cup clicked against the saucer. There are moments when cruel people get tired of pretending. They mistake the absence of your shouting for weakness and decide the performance is no longer necessary. Margaret leaned back and looked at me with the relief of a woman setting down a heavy mask. "That bracelet was wasted in a box," she said. I heard my own heartbeat. "Say that again." "Grace deserves to belong to a child who will actually carry this family forward." The room became very still. Outside the glass, a gardener trimmed roses with careful little snips. Inside, Margaret Cross looked at me and told me my dead child's memory had been reassigned. "You stole from my memory box." "I preserved a family heirloom." "It was not your family heirloom. It had the Cross name attached to it." "It had my child's name attached to it." Her mouth tightened. "Your child did not live, Elena." I had imagined many versions of this confrontation on the drive over. In none of them did she say something that cleanly monstrous. Maybe because some part of me still believed in limits. "Julian is young," Margaret continued. "He is handsome. He deserves a family. He deserves a woman who can give him joy instead of schedules, audits, and grief rituals. You built him a company, yes. Bianca is giving him a legacy." "You mean a baby. I mean a future." "And what was I giving him when I sold my mother's home? When I paid his debts? When I put him in the CEO chair? When I bought this estate? When I covered your medical bills, your Mercedes, your vacations, your allowance, your jewelry, your charity tables? What was that?" "Money," she said, as if the word smelled bad. "Money does not make a woman a real wife." "No," I said. "But apparently my money made your family look respectable enough to judge me." Her face flushed. "Do not speak to me like that in my home." I laughed once. It surprised both of us. "Your home?" "Family property." I took out my phone and called Adrian. He answered immediately because by then, he knew any call from me might involve blood without violence. "Yes," he said. "Margaret is confirming the bracelet was taken intentionally. Begin asset review on the Greenwich estate, the Mercedes, the personal allowance transfers, trust-linked benefits, medical payments, jewelry reimbursements, and any family expenses connected to my accounts or Marlowe Meridian vendors." Margaret stood so quickly her chair scraped the tile. "How dare you!" Adrian's voice came through the speaker, calm as winter. "Mrs. Cross, this is Adrian Holt. I advise you not to destroy, transfer, gift, sell, conceal, or alter possession of any asset purchased, maintained, or improved with funds originating from Ms. Marlowe, her trusts, or Marlowe Meridian Group. Written notice will follow." "You cannot threaten me in my own house," Margaret snapped. "Margaret," I said, ending the call, "the only thing your family contributed to this house was entitlement." Her composure cracked. "Julian will stop you." "Julian cannot even stop me from owning my own company." The front door opened then, hard enough that voices echoed from the foyer. Julian appeared in the solarium with no tie, hair disordered, face tight with panic. He must have tracked my car or received a call from his mother's housekeeper. For 1 second, seeing him hurt so sharply, I almost forgot to hate him. He looked like my husband. Not the man from the office, not the strategist, not the liar. My husband. the man who once danced with me in a Brooklyn kitchen because we had closed our first major deal and could not afford a restaurant. Elena, he said, please don't involve my mother. She involved herself when she put my dead child's bracelet on your mistress's registry. His eyes moved to Margaret. That glance told me everything. He knew. He had not necessarily taken it himself, but he knew. Maybe he had allowed Margaret to take it. Maybe he had handed her the key. It hardly mattered. Listen to me, he said, lowering his voice. This has gotten out of control. No, Julian. For the first time, it is under control. Margaret pointed at him, rage making her voice shrill. You told me she would not find out until after the gala. There it was, the slip, the confirmation. Julian closed his eyes. I looked at him and felt the last soft thread between us burn. Thank you, Margaret, I said. That was helpful. I left them standing in the solarium, mother and son, surrounded by flowers paid for with my money and lies watered by my grief. On the drive back into the city, Nora's revised Gala file sat open on the passenger seat of my car, printed in black and white because sometimes betrayal is easier to understand when it has page numbers. The original event title had been Marlowe Meridian 10th Anniversary Celebration. The revised title was The Next Generation of Cross Leadership. Cross. Not Marlowe Meridian, Cross. The agenda had been changed in a private version, not distributed to my staff. Item 1. Tribute to Julian Cross's decade of leadership. Item 2. A difficult but graceful transition. Item 3. Announcement of Julian's new family. Item 4. Introduction of Bianca Vale. Item 5. Pregnancy reveal. Item 6. Proposal for Elena Marlowe Cross to take a temporary leave from public leadership. Item 7. Presentation of revised voting authority to stabilize company perception. Item 8. Closing toast by Margaret Cross. I pulled over near the river because my hands had begun to shake. There was a speech draft attached, Julian's speech. I read it sitting in the driver's seat while traffic moved around me. Elena and I have privately separated after years of emotional distance. Number. Elena's grief and health struggles have made leadership increasingly heavy for her. Number. I have chosen transparency tonight because our company, our investors, and our family deserve stability. Number. Bianca has been a source of peace during a difficult private chapter. I folded the paper so hard the edge cut my finger. He was not leaving me. He was staging me. He was building a public record in real time, using my miscarriage as evidence, my pain as motive, my silence as admission. He planned to put Bianca on a stage in Ivory, announce her pregnancy, name the baby Grace, and then ask the board and investors to accept that I was too emotionally fragile to remain fully in command. If I cried, I would prove him right. If I shouted, I would prove him right. If I walked out, I would prove him right. If I stayed silent, he would rewrite my life in front of everyone. Julian had chosen this battlefield carefully. He had just forgotten I owned the ground underneath it. By noon, Celeste arrived at my condo with 2 laptops, 3 folders, and the expression of a woman who had been waiting months for permission to stop pretending numbers were innocent. Celeste Warren was 48, brilliant, severe, and allergic to incompetence. She had been with Marlowe Meridian for 7 years and had the rare gift of making financial fraud sound personally offensive to arithmetic itself. I suspected irregularities in the CEO office discretionary budget, she said, opening the first folder. But the approvals were routed through Julian's authority, and several invoices were coded as sensitive investor relations or executive wellness. Without cause, I could flag but not freeze. You have cause now, I assumed. She showed me the vendor trail. Northbridge procurement appeared repeatedly across 12 months, consulting retainers with vague deliverables, event support, executive accommodations, wellness reimbursements, client relations expenses, relocation logistics, small enough individually to avoid board attention, large enough together to build a private life. Payments connected to a Tribeca condo, luxury furniture, a private medical clinic, jewelry, travel, custom nursery items, a mural deposit, a designer stroller through an event vendor. Even Bianca's maternity wardrobe had been routed through a leadership transition optics expense. Celeste tapped one invoice with a red fingernail. This is not sloppy spending. This is someone building a second household through company accounts. I stared at the numbers. I had sold my mother's brownstone to build this company. I had worked through a miscarriage to keep it alive. Julian had used it as a purse for his mistress's nursery. What can we prove by tonight? I asked. Enough to suspend spending authority? Enough to show misuse? Enough to make the board very uncomfortable. I don't want discomfort. I want record. Then we need Owen. Owen Price looked like someone who had wandered into corporate IT from a punk band and stayed because servers were less dramatic than musicians. He arrived wearing a black hoodie under a blazer, carrying an encrypted drive and a face full of contained fury. Owen had been hired after a ransomware scare 4 years earlier. Julian disliked him because Owen did not flatter anyone who used weak passwords. I have preserved email, message metadata, file access logs, deletion attempts, badge entries, printing records, and external drive connections, Owen said. Julian's office tried to purge calendar notes last week. Bianca's laptop has classification edits on multiple expense files. Someone in procurement changed vendor descriptions after hours. Can you build a clean presentation? I can build a presentation a drunk juror could understand. Do it. Adrian arrived after 3 with legal notices and the kind of calm that made everyone else breathe easier. He reviewed the evidence, tightened language, removed anything too inflammatory, and reminded me that humiliation was not the goal. The goal is preservation, suspension, and control, he said. The gala was designed as humiliation. Yes, by him. You will not mirror his mistake. You will expose corporate facts and protect your position. The emotional facts matter, but they must support motive, deception, and reputational strategy. I'm going to say her name. Grace? Yes. Adrian nodded once. Then say it carefully. Nora called at 5, voice trembling. Elena, I need to know whether to cancel. No. They changed the staging again. There's a white cradle being delivered as part of the announcement backdrop. I refused to sign for it. A cradle. I looked at Celeste, then Owen, then Adrian. All 3 of them had gone still. Do not cancel, I told Nora. Do not warn Julian. Keep the original anniversary visuals loaded, but give Owen access to the projection system under my authority. Seat the board where the cameras can see them. Seat the press where they can see the screen. Make sure Margaret's microphone works. Nora swallowed audibly. Margaret's microphone? I want everyone to hear her. Elena, are you sure you can walk into that room? No. The honest answer was no. I was not emotionally ready to watch my husband introduce his pregnant mistress beneath flowers I had paid for. I was not ready to hear my dead child's name applauded by people who did not know it had been stolen. I was not ready to stand in a ballroom and become a spectacle. But I was legally ready. So that is what I said. The gala was held at a luxury hotel in Manhattan where the ballroom windows looked out over the city like money had taught the skyline to behave. White orchids lined the entrance. Champagne moved on silver trays. The step and repeat wall displayed the Marlowe Meridian logo beside a discreet anniversary mark. 10 years of vision, resilience, and leadership. I had approved that phrase months earlier. It sounded different now. I arrived in a black satin suit. Margaret had told Julian I should wear silver because it would make me look soft under the lights. I knew this because Nora had sent me the wardrobe note Bianca accidentally forwarded with other event details. Soft. They wanted me soft. A woman in silver, sentimental and fragile, sitting politely while her husband turned her marriage into a succession plan. Black suited the occasion better. It was not a celebration anymore. It was a funeral for the lie. The photographers called my name as I stepped onto the carpet. Elena, over here, Mrs. Cross, one smile. Mrs. Cross. I gave them a smile calm enough to be mistaken for peace. Julian saw me near the entrance to the ballroom. For 1 second, his face did what guilty faces do. It searched for what I knew. Then he smiled for the cameras and crossed the room with both hands extended. Elena, he said, kissing the air beside my cheek. You made it. From Chicago, I asked. Yes, early actually. His fingers tightened around mine. I didn't realize. I know, a flicker. Then charm returned like a curtain dropping. You look beautiful. You look nervous. He laughed too loudly. Big night. Very. Bianca entered 20 minutes later. She wore ivory. Not quite a wedding dress, because even Bianca understood the value of deniability, but close enough that every woman in the room noticed. The dress draped over her stomach in deliberate softness. She held one hand there as she walked, performing motherhood like a press release. Margaret met her halfway across the ballroom and kissed both her cheeks. Cameras caught it. Guests whispered. Board members exchanged glances. Investors looked toward me. I kept my face still because I knew Julian was watching for a crack. Bianca approached me after Margaret released her. Her perfume reached me first, floral and expensive. Elena, she said, you look strong. There it was. The little insult wrapped as admiration. You look funded, I said. Her smile faltered. Julian appeared beside her before she could answer. Bianca has been invaluable with tonight's program. I saw. He studied my face again. Did Nora send you the final version? She sent me enough. Good, he said, misreading me, because arrogance always assumes it is still safe. There may be some surprises, but I hope you'll trust me. I looked at his hand, the same hand that had rested on Bianca's stomach, the same hand that once held mine in a hospital room. I trusted you for 10 years. For the first time that evening, Julian looked away. Dinner was a blur of crystal, orchids, and polite conversation. People toasted the company. They praised Julian's leadership. Some praised mine too. But even the balance of compliments had shifted because Julian had been preparing the room. I heard phrases that did not belong to coincidence. You must be looking forward to a slower season. After everything you've been through, rest is important. Julian has been such a stabilizing presence. Bianca is just lovely, isn't she? The narrative had already seeped into the walls. At my table, Adrian sat to my right, appearing as merely counsel and close friend. Celeste sat 2 tables away with the audit committee. Owen was in the AV booth wearing a headset, and the expression of a man waiting to press one key that could ruin a kingdom. Nora moved through the room like a ghost with a clipboard, making sure every piece of the trap Julian had built remained in place until it became his own. Then the lights dimmed. Julian walked to the stage beneath a screen showing a photograph from our early years. Him and me standing in front of the first office, laughing beside the door table. My stomach twisted. He had chosen that image because it made him look original, foundational, as if he had been there building from the beginning in the same way I had. Good evening, he began, voice warm, practiced, beautiful. Tonight is about 10 years. 10 years of ambition, sacrifice, partnership, and transformation. Applause. He looked at me. When Elena and I began this journey, we could not have imagined the company Marlowe Meridian would become. I almost smiled. We. Such a small word. Such an efficient thief. He thanked investors, he thanked the board, he thanked employees. He spoke about sleepless nights and impossible deals, but somehow every example placed him at the center. He said my name often enough that no one could accuse him of erasing me, but each mention sounded like a retirement tribute. Elena's determination has carried this company through storms, he said, But sometimes determination comes at a cost. Some women build companies, other women build homes. Tonight, I honor both kinds of women. The room shifted. The sentence landed badly. Women looked at each other. Men looked at their plates. Margaret smiled as if he had quoted scripture. Julian continued, "Many of you know that Elena and I have faced private pain. We have tried to handle it with dignity. We have grown in different directions. And in recent years, we have been privately separated in spirit, even where public duty required unity." I felt Adrian's hand rest lightly on the table, not touching me, just reminding me he was there. Julian turned toward Bianca's table. But life, in its mercy, brings new beginnings. Bianca rose on cue. One hand on her stomach, the cameras turned like hungry animals. Julian extended his hand. She walked to the stage slowly, eyes shining. Margaret began clapping first. A few people joined, confused, then stopped when they realized I had not moved. "This is Bianca Vale," Julian said, though everyone knew who she was. "She has been my peace during a difficult private chapter. She has reminded me that legacy is not only what we build in steel and glass, but what we nurture in love." Gasps began before he finished. Someone dropped a fork. Julian placed his hand on Bianca's stomach. "And tonight, with honesty and hope, I want to share that Bianca and I are expecting a daughter. Our daughter, Grace, represents the future of the Cross family and the next generation of leadership." Grace. The name crossed the ballroom and entered me like a knife placed precisely in an old scar. I stood. The room went silent so quickly I could hear the hum of the projectors. Julian saw me rise, and for the first time, fear broke through the performance. "Elena," he said gently into the microphone, choosing the tone of a man soothing an unstable woman. "I know this is emotional." "Yes," I said, walking toward the stage. "It is." Adrian rose too, but he did not follow. Not yet. The stage steps felt longer than they were. My body remembered every humiliating thing Margaret had ever said. Every night Julian came home smelling like Bianca's perfume. Every doctor's voice. Every silent anniversary after the miscarriage. But my voice, when I reached the microphone Julian tried not to give me, was steady. "Before my husband introduces his new family," I said, "I believe everyone deserves to know how he paid for it." The screen behind us went black. Julian turned. "What is this?" The anniversary photo disappeared. In its place appeared a white slide with black lettering. "Emergency Audit Report, Marlowe Meridian Group. Authorized by Elena Marlowe, founder, chairwoman, and controlling shareholder, 59%. A murmur rolled across the ballroom. Julian stepped toward me. "Elena, don't." I looked at him. "That is the first honest thing you have said tonight." Owen advanced the slide. The first document appeared. A draft divorce announcement. Not a court filing, not a signed agreement. A staged narrative document created under Julian's private account titled Separation Language for Gala. "Elena and I have privately separated after years of emotional distance." I read. "That is what Julian planned to tell you. For clarity, I have never signed divorce papers. I have never been served divorce papers. There is no private separation agreement. There is a draft story." The next slide, Julian's speech draft with highlighted lines about my grief and health struggles making leadership heavy. This is the language prepared to suggest that my miscarriage and health history made me unfit to remain in leadership. Bianca whispered, "Julian." Julian grabbed the microphone. "This is private marital pain. Elena is weaponizing it because she is hurt." I nodded. "I am hurt, but this is not private marital pain." The screen changed again. Bianca's baby registry, Grace Cross, the luxury crib, the stroller, the nursery mural, the gold bracelet. Grandma Margaret's keepsake gift. A sound went through the room. Not quite a gasp, something lower. "Grace," I said, and the microphone carried the name clearly. was the name Julian and I chose for the baby we lost 3 years ago. That bracelet was engraved for that child. It was kept in my private memory box after the miscarriage. It disappeared from my home and appeared on Bianca's registry as a gift from Margaret Cross. Margaret stood. "You bitter Baron?" "Nora," I said without looking away from Margaret, "please make sure Mrs. Cross's microphone is active." Her voice boomed through the ballroom on the table mic before she realized it. "You are jealous of a real mother." There it was. The cruelty, no longer hidden in solariums and dinner tables. I turned to her. "No, Margaret, I am not jealous of Bianca's pregnancy. I am disgusted that you tried to build it on the grave of my child." The room went still in a different way then. Before, they were watching scandal. Now they were witnessing desecration. Bianca began to cry. She was good at it. One hand to her mouth, eyes wide, shoulders trembling. "I didn't know," she said. "Julian told me Elena had moved on from the name. I didn't know about the bracelet." Owen advanced the slide. A text message appeared. Bianca to Julian. "Are you sure using Grace won't make her suspicious?" The crying stopped. I looked at Bianca. "You knew enough to ask?" Her face drained of color. The next slides moved faster. Company funds routed through Northbridge procurement to cover Bianca's condo deposits. Medical clinic reimbursements coded as executive wellness. Nursery furniture disguised as event staging. Jewelry purchases marked as client relations. A mural consultant paid through a vendor attached to Gala design. Emails from Julian saying Elena would not check small emotional expenses during anniversary planning. Bianca's classification edits on invoices. Margaret's message, "Use the infertility issue. She will fold." People began turning toward Julian as if seeing him for the first time. Board members leaned toward one another. Investors whispered into phones. Employees held their breath. The press stopped pretending not to record. Julian's charm shattered. "These are internal documents taken out of context." Celeste stood from the audit committee table. "They are preliminary findings from a privileged emergency audit, and the source records are preserved." "You had no authority to run that audit without me," Julian snapped. "I did," I said. "As controlling shareholder, 59%. The room heard the number. So did Julian. His eyes widened because that was when he understood the protective trust had already activated. "You can't do this tonight," he said. "You chose tonight." Adrian walked to the stage then, holding a folder. He did not take the microphone. He did not need drama. "Mr. Cross, on behalf of the board's independent review process and pursuant to controlling shareholder action, you are being served with notice of immediate suspension of discretionary CEO spending authority, preservation obligations, audit expansion, and temporary restriction of executive system access pending review. Additional notices regarding gifted share misconduct provisions and potential clawback are included." Julian looked at the board chair, then at the investors, then at me. His face became ugly in a way I had only glimpsed during arguments when no one else was there to admire him. "You think this makes you look strong, Yikes?" he said into the microphone, forgetting it was still live. "You look insane. This is why no one can live with you. Everything is a transaction. Everything is a file. You lost a baby and turned into a corporation." For a second, pain moved through me so sharply I almost stepped back. Then I heard Margaret's voice from the solarium in my memory. "You told me she would not find out until after the gala." "Owen," I said. Audio filled the ballroom. Margaret's voice, recorded during the Greenwich confrontation through Adrian's call log and documented by his presence on speaker, rang out. "You told me she would not find out until after the gala." Julian's own voice followed faintly in the background. "Mother, stop." The recording ended. No one spoke. I looked at Julian, then Bianca, then Margaret. "He wanted to announce a new legacy tonight. He succeeded. This is the night Marlowe Meridian stops being used to fund the Cross family's lies." The board chair rose. "Mr. Cross, step down from the stage." Julian did not move. Security approached. That was the image that went viral by midnight. Julian Cross standing under the word audit, Bianca frozen beside him in ivory, Margaret shouting from a table full of untouched champagne, and me in a black satin suit holding a microphone like a verdict. But the room thought the pregnancy was the scandal. By midnight, the auditors found the nursery was only the smallest invoice. The first clip hit social media before dessert could be cleared. Someone captioned it, CEO announces pregnant secretary at anniversary gala. Wife reveals he used company money. Another clip focused on Margaret calling me jealous of a real mother. A third showed the slide with Grace Cross and the bracelet. By morning, every business outlet that had once called Julian a visionary was asking how much of his vision had been billed through vendors. Julian released a statement at 3:08 a.m. It said, I had suffered an emotional breakdown, weaponized private grief, and disrupted a company event with misleading information. It said he was cooperating fully with internal review. It said he loved all parties involved and asked for privacy for the sake of an unborn child. I read it once and sent it to Adrian. He replied, predictable, useful, do not respond personally. The board responded instead. By noon, they issued a statement confirming an emergency independent audit, temporary suspension of Julian Cross's executive authority, preservation of records, and appointment of interim operational oversight under my chairmanship. They did not mention Bianca. They did not mention Grace. Corporations are careful that way. They name the fire only after the insurance company has measured the smoke. Inside Marlowe Meridian, the air changed. People who had avoided my eyes at the gala sent messages. Assistants came forward with calendar details. Procurement analysts admitted Northbridge had always felt wrong. A junior accountant forwarded a spreadsheet she had kept privately because she feared retaliation if she questioned CEO expenses. One employee wrote, I am sorry, we all saw things, but we thought you knew. That sentence hurt in its own way. We thought you knew. People always assume powerful women know every way they are being betrayed. They forget, power does not make you immune to love. Sometimes it only gives people more elaborate reasons to lie to you. Celeste's expanded audit made the first version look almost polite. Northbridge procurement was not a vendor so much as a pipe. Money flowed through it in softened language. Consulting, staging, executive wellness, family office coordination, leadership transition support, donor hospitality, sensitive travel. From there, funds moved to contractors connected to Bianca's condo, luxury retail accounts, clinics, car services, and shell entities tied to people who knew Margaret socially. The Tribeca condo was not owned by Bianca outright, not yet. A holding company had signed the lease to purchase agreement with payments routed through strategic accommodation expenses. The furniture was billed as staging inventory. The nursery mural was billed as brand environment consulting. Clinic visits were reimbursed through an executive wellness package Julian had approved for himself, and then quietly extended to essential confidential support staff. Jewelry purchases were coded as client appreciation. A diamond necklace Bianca wore at the gala had been purchased the same week Julian denied my request for additional cybersecurity budget because we were watching discretionary spend. Margaret's benefits were uglier because they revealed duration. Estate improvements paid through vendors who also serviced company properties. Private car service categorized as investor transportation. Medical spa treatments hidden inside wellness invoices. A family-linked shell paid for legacy advisory, jewelry insurance. Event gowns. A greenhouse renovation routed through a landscape contractor working on one of our developments. I sat with Celeste and watched numbers turn into betrayal. There will be criminal exposure, she said. Good. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. That means headlines, investors, depositions, maybe subpoenas, maybe damage to the company. Julian already damaged the company. I know. I am disinfecting the wound. Celeste's mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile. Then we will need gloves. Owen locked access for Julian, Bianca, 3 procurement employees, Margaret's assistant, and 2 Northbridge contacts. He preserved deleted drafts and found that Julian had attempted to create a new administrative credential 2 days before the gala. The credential would have allowed access to board materials and emergency communications. He also found Bianca's laptop edits on expense classifications. She had not just accepted gifts, she had helped disguise them. Adrian moved on the gifted share agreement. Julian's minority shares, the ones I had transferred years earlier, to protect his pride, included misconduct provisions triggered by fraud, misuse of company assets, reputational sabotage, and attempts to interfere with my control through deception. Adrian did not gloat when he told me. He simply placed the agreement on the conference table and said, "This is why I made you sign the version you called unromantic." I touched the page. I was very offended. "You were very in love." Same mental impairment. That is not a legal term, but yes. The emergency board meeting took place 2 days after the gala. Julian arrived with 2 attorneys, no wedding ring, and the hollowed-out look of a man who had slept badly for the first time in years. He wore his best navy suit. I knew because I had bought it for him after our 5th anniversary. The tailor had said it made him look presidential. I had said it made him look expensive. Both of us had been wrong. It made him look like a defendant trying to remember charm was not a defense. He sat across from me at the long glass table. The board chair read the review scope. Celeste summarized financial exposure. Owen summarized digital preservation. Adrian summarized corporate authority. Julian listened with his jaw tight. Then he leaned forward. "I built this company with her," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "You stood in the photographs." A few people looked down. No one contradicted me. Julian's eyes flashed. "You think leadership is only paperwork and money?" I gave Marlo Meridian a face. "You gave it invoices. I gave it relationships. You use those relationships to hide a second household." He pointed at Celeste's folder. "These numbers are being interpreted maliciously because my wife is angry that I found happiness." The board chair said, "Mr. Cross, this is not a marital forum." Julian laughed bitterly. "Of course it is. Everything Elena does is control. She controls the company, the board, the money, the story. She even wants to control what I name my daughter." I felt the room tighten. "Your daughter can have any name in the world," I said. "She cannot have the one you stole from the child we lost and funded with money you stole from my company." His attorney touched his sleeve, warning him to stop. Julian ignored him. "You don't get to own grief forever." "No," I said. "But you do not get to repurpose it as branding." That landed. I saw it in the faces around the table. Not pity, understanding. There is a difference. Pity looks down. Understanding looks straight at the wound and refuses to call it drama. Bianca's office laptop created the next wave of trouble. Owen recovered files showing she had manually changed expense descriptions from nursery mural balance to brand environment consultation, prenatal clinic to executive wellness, Tribeca furniture deposit to temporary staging assets, and maternity wardrobe to leadership transition optics. She had saved screenshots of wire confirmations. She had voice notes from Julian promising marriage after the gala. She had messages from Margaret calling her the real mother of this family. Bianca had been ambitious, yes. Cruel, yes. But she had also been foolish in the way people become foolish when they believe proximity to power is the same as possession of it. She thought the condo was proof Julian loved her. She thought the baby name was proof she had won. She thought the money flowing around her was protection. It was evidence. On the 3rd day after the gala, Adrian called to say Bianca was moving. What kind of moving? Cash withdrawal, flight search, building staff reported boxes. Investigator sees activity at the Tribeca condo. I looked at the audit file on my desk. Does she know she can't take assets tied to company funds? She has been notified. Whether she understands is another matter. I want the bracelet. Elena, I want my child's bracelet. We can go with counsel, building security, and an inventory witness. You will not enter alone. You will not touch anything until documented. I understand. Do you? I looked at the photograph of the registry. No, but I will behave as if I do. Bianca's building in Tribeca had a lobby that smelled like white flowers and cold money. The doorman recognized Adrian before he recognized me, which was probably for the best. We went up with a legal assistant, a building security manager, and an inventory specialist carrying a camera. I stood behind Adrian when he knocked. Bianca opened the door wearing leggings, an oversized sweater, and fear. For one strange second, she looked young. Not innocent, never innocent, but young enough that I could see the girl she might have been before she decided another woman's life was a ladder. She thought we were Julian. Her face had opened with expectation before she saw me. No, she said, stepping back. You can't be here. Adrian held out the notice. Miss Vale, we are here to document and secure items potentially purchased with misappropriated company funds and to recover personal property belonging to Ms. Marlowe. Building security is present. You have the right to contact counsel. I don't have to let you in. The security manager cleared his throat. Miss Vale, management has received legal notice regarding disputed corporate property on the premises. We can wait for police if necessary. Bianca looked at me. This is harassment. No, I said. Harassment is putting my dead child's bracelet on your nursery wall. She flinched. Then she opened the door. The condo was beautiful in the way staged apartments are beautiful. White leather, pale wood, oversized art, no history. Designer bags sat half-packed near the sofa. Pregnancy books were stacked on the coffee table beside unopened jewelry boxes. A garment rack held ivory, cream, blush, and pale blue dresses with tags still attached. Everything looked soft. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked temporary. The inventory specialist began photographing. Adrian gave instructions in a low voice. Bianca hovered near the kitchen island, one hand on her stomach, watching me as if I might attack her. I did not look at her. I followed the hallway to the nursery. The door was open. I had thought the registry prepared me. It did not. The room was painted a warm white with a mural of pale gold branches stretching across one wall. A French crib stood beneath a silk canopy. A rocking chair sat in the corner, draped with a cashmere blanket embroidered with the initials G.C. On the main wall, in hand-painted script, were the words, "Welcome home, Grace." Beneath them hung a framed ultrasound, and below the ultrasound, in a small shadow box lined with ivory velvet, was the bracelet. My bracelet. Grace's bracelet. For a moment, the condo disappeared. I was back in the hospital, empty and bleeding, Julian asleep in the chair because grief had exhausted him, my own hands resting on a body that had failed to keep what it loved. I remembered ordering the bracelet. I remembered thinking one day I would fasten it around a tiny wrist. I remembered placing it in the memory box and promising myself I would not become a shrine to pain. Then I was in Tribeca again, staring at that same bracelet displayed as decor in another woman's nursery. I heard Bianca behind me. Julian said you hated the name after everything happened. I did not turn. Then why did you text him asking if using Grace would make me suspicious? Silence. Answer me. He said you were dramatic about things, she whispered. He said you used the miscarriage to control him. He said the name was his too. I finally turned. And the bracelet? Her eyes filled. This time, I did not care whether the tears were real. Margaret brought it, she said. She said it belonged to the Cross family. She said you had kept it hidden like punishment. Adrian stepped into the doorway. Miss Vale, please be very careful. You are describing possession of disputed personal property. Bianca pressed both hands to her stomach. I didn't steal from the company. Julian told me everything was approved. He told me this was part of the transition. He said, after the gala, you would step back, and it would all be legal. Legal, I repeated. People use that word when they mean someone else is supposed to suffer quietly. Her phone rang then. Julian's name lit the screen. Bianca froze. Adrian said, "You are not required to answer." I said, "Answer it." Adrian looked at me. "I won't speak," I said, "but answer it." Bianca's hand shook as she accepted the call, and maybe because fear makes people obedient, put it on speaker. "Where are you?" Julian demanded. "In the condo? Did you get the deed packet?" "Julian's?" "Listen to me. Take the condo documents, the clinic emails, anything from Northbridge, and leave. Do not let Elena get the bracelet. Do you hear me? Destroy the nursery invoices. Delete the messages from my mother. I can fix this. But not if you panic." No one moved. His voice continued. "Bianca? Are you there?" Adrian said clearly. "Mr. Cross, this is Adrian Holt. You are on speaker in the presence of witnesses." The call went dead. Bianca sat down on the edge of the rocking chair, as if her bones had dissolved. "I kept backups," she said. "Julian had underestimated her, too." Maybe that is the thing about men like Julian. They think every woman in their life is a supporting character. The wife who builds, the mother who excuses, the mistress who obeys, the secretary who smiles, the CFO who misses things, the event planner who follows orders. They forget women keep receipts because men keep giving us reasons. Bianca had emails, texts, voice notes, wire confirmations, photos of invoices Julian told her to hide, screenshots of promises he made after midnight, messages from Margaret discussing the announcement, even a recording of Julian saying the baby would secure the cross name after I was handled. She said she kept them because she did not fully trust him. Hearing that almost made me laugh. "You trusted him enough to steal my child's name?" I said. She looked down. "I wanted him to choose me. He chose himself." The inventory specialist photographed the shadow box. Adrian documented the bracelet's identifying marks against my original receipt and photographs. Only then did he nod. I removed the bracelet myself. It was lighter than I remembered. Or maybe I had become stronger in the wrong places. I held it in my palm and closed my fingers around the tiny chain. "Grace was never yours to inherit," I said. Bianca sobbed behind me. I walked out of the nursery before I could begin to hate the unborn child, because the baby had done nothing. That mattered. I repeated it silently all the way down the hallway. The baby had done nothing. The baby was innocent. The cruelty belonged to the adults who tried to wrap her in stolen grief. By the time I left the condo, Bianca had become a cooperating witness in everything but name. The apartment she thought proved Julian loved her had become evidence that he stole from both of us. The next person to come forward was Victor Hale, Julian's former driver. Victor had worked for the company for 4 years before leaving abruptly 6 months earlier. At the time, Julian told me Victor had been unreliable, possibly drinking, not someone we should rehire. I was too busy with a financing round to investigate. That became another entry on the list of things I regretted. Victor emailed my private account with the subject line, "I drove him. I kept records." We met in Adrian's office because by then I trusted no room without privilege attached. Victor was a compact man in his 50s with tired eyes and a folder of printed logs. He sat stiffly, cap in his hands, and apologized before saying anything else. "I should have told you," he said. "But Mr. Cross said if I opened my mouth, he'd say I stole from the cars. I got grandkids. I needed my pension. What did you drive him to?" Adrian asked. Victor opened the folder. Clinic visits, hotels, Miss Vale's building, meetings with a man from Northbridge Procurement, a storage unit in Queens, sometimes Mrs. Cross, the older one, Margaret. She rode along. She talked like I wasn't there. He had dates, times, addresses, toll receipts, parking payments, and handwritten notes, because his father had taught him never to trust a rich man who asked to be dropped around the corner. The storage unit mattered most. Adrian obtained access through legal channels tied to company property concerns. We went with investigators and police standby. The unit smelled like dust, cardboard, and panic. Inside were bankers' boxes stacked under a tarp, a portable safe, two old company laptops, and a shredder still full of paper strips. The file labels told the story. Divorce narrative, board transition, Bianca relocation, Northbridge alternate, Elena health, Elena transition. I opened the last file with gloved hands. Inside was a plan to make me look emotionally unstable and unfit. It was not just a speech, it was a campaign. Notes on which board members worried about reputational risk. Draft emails from concerned investors. Suggested talking points about my miscarriage. A timeline showing how Julian would announce the separation, ask me to take leave, assume emergency authority, and later negotiate a dignified exit from active leadership while retaining my public blessing. There were even notes about staging paparazzi photographs of Bianca looking maternal and me looking isolated. One line had been underlined twice. Elena's strength is public. Break her privately first. I sat on an upturned box and read that sentence until it stopped being words and became a mirror. Adrian crouched beside me. You do not have to keep reading. Yes, I said, I do. Because I needed to see the whole machine, not just the affair, not just the money, not just the nursery. I needed to understand that Julian had studied my love, my grief, my pride, my habits, my restraint, and built a strategy around them. He knew I would not want scandal. He knew I would protect the company. He knew I would hesitate to drag Grace into public. He knew I would try to be dignified. He counted on my dignity as a hiding place. That realization hurt more than the cheating. The man I loved had not simply stopped loving me. He had converted intimacy into intelligence. The storage unit gave Adrian enough to expand notices. It gave Celeste enough to connect Northbridge to shell companies. It gave Owen enough device identifiers to trace unauthorized system access. It gave law enforcement enough interest to stop calling it a domestic dispute with the financial complications. Julian must have learned about the storage unit within hours, because that night he made his last stupid move. At 11:42 p.m., Owen detected an unauthorized access attempt at headquarters. Someone used a dormant contractor badge to enter the service elevator. The badge had been deactivated in the system, but reactivated from an administrative credential created before the gala. Owen had set an alert for exactly that. He called me first, then security, then Adrian. Do not go there, Adrian said when I answered. I am already in the car. Elena, I am not going alone. Security and police are going. But if he is in my building destroying my company, I will be present when he is stopped. There was a pause. Stay behind security. I am very good at staying behind men who think they are in front. That is not reassuring. Headquarters looked different after midnight. The lobby lights were low. The city outside was wet with rain. Security met us at the entrance with two officers. Owen was already there in jeans and a coat, laptop under his arm, fury making him look almost cheerful. He's in the executive file room or CEO suite, Owen said, trying to wipe mail stores and access physical backups. He doesn't understand our redundancy because he never listened in security briefings. We took the elevator up. The executive floor smelled faintly of smoke, not fire, but overheated electronics. The CEO suite door was open. Papers were scattered across the floor. A server backup drive lay cracked near the desk. Julian stood beside the file cabinet with his sleeves rolled up, holding a stack of folders. For 1 second, no one spoke. He looked at the officers, then security, then Adrian, then me. You brought police to our office? He said. Our office? I replied. His face twisted. Of course. That is what you care about. One officer told him to put the files down. Julian laughed. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes red, hair damp from rain or sweat. Without the suit armor, without the ballroom lights, without Bianca's hand on his arm, he looked smaller than I remembered. "You made me feel like nothing for 10 years," he said to me. "Do you know that? Nothing. Every room, every deal, every article, it was Elena. Elena, Elena. Do you know what it's like to be married to a woman everyone knows is better than you?" "Yes," I said. "It must be awful to benefit from the woman you resent. You never needed me. I loved you. That was neat enough." "No," he snapped. "You loved building. You loved winning. You loved being untouchable. Bianca made me feel like a man. She made you feel admired. She gave me what you couldn't." There it was. The old wound pulled out like a weapon one last time. I stepped closer, though Adrian murmured my name. "She gave you a child," I said. "You gave her stolen money, stolen jewelry, a stolen name, and a stolen future. Do not confuse fertility with love." His mouth opened, closed. "You think you're morally superior because you suffered," he said. "No, I think I am done suffering for your insecurity." The officers moved then. Julian resisted just enough to make it uglier. Not a dramatic fight. A rich man's version of resistance. Jerking his arm away, demanding his attorney, shouting that he was CEO, that this was a misunderstanding, that I had set him up. The broken drive, the reactivated badge, the file destruction, and the preservation order said otherwise. As they let him out, he looked back at me. "I loved you once," he said. That almost did it. Not because I believed it excused anything, because I believed it might be true, and truth inside betrayal is its own kind of cruelty. "I know," I said. "That is the part I will have to grieve." The elevator doors closed on him. The CEO office was a ruin of scattered documents and shattered performance. His framed magazine cover still hung behind the desk. Julian Cross, modern builder. I took it off the wall myself and placed it face down on the floor. "Margaret called me at 1:16 a.m. I answered because some endings deserve a final line. "You destroyed my son," she said. Her voice shook with rage and fear. "No," I said. "I stopped financing him. You will regret this. Blood matters. Family matters. My child was blood. You treated her name like decoration. She was not born. She was loved." Margaret made a sound of disgust. "You are a cold woman." "No, Margaret. I became cold where your family kept touching the wound." Then I blocked her. The months that followed were not satisfying in the way people imagine revenge should be satisfying. There were no clean endings, no single judge's gavel that turned pain into justice, no morning when I woke up and felt restored. There were depositions, there were headlines, there were investor calls where men who had once adored Julian's charm asked me whether the company culture had enabled his misconduct, as if I had personally installed adultery in the procurement system. There were employees frightened for their jobs. There were attorneys billing in 6-minute increments while my marriage became evidence. Julian was indicted on charges tied to fraud, embezzlement, forgery, evidence destruction, and conspiracy. The language shifted as prosecutors refined it, but the meaning remained. He had used company power for personal deception and then tried to bury the proof. Northbridge procurement became a separate investigation. 2 internal employees cooperated. One resigned before being terminated, which did not save him. Margaret's assistant turned over messages after learning loyalty did not include prison. Bianca cooperated too. I wish I could say I felt nothing when I heard. I felt many things, none of them clean. She lost the condo. The jewelry tied to company funds was seized or surrendered. The designer furniture became inventory in a fraud file. She moved in with an aunt in New Jersey while heavily pregnant and gave a statement through counsel saying she had been manipulated by Julian Cross but accepted responsibility for her role in misclassified expenses. Her attorney asked mine whether I intended to pursue the bracelet issue separately. I looked at Grace's bracelet in its evidence pouch and said no, not because Bianca deserved mercy, because Grace's name deserved to leave the courtroom. I do not know what Bianca named the baby. I asked Adrian not to tell me if he found out. The child was innocent, and innocence should not have to carry the wreckage adults build before birth. The divorce papers arrived in a thick envelope on a Tuesday afternoon. Real ones this time. I signed in Adrian's conference room with a pen that scratched slightly against the paper. My name looked strange without cross attached to it, even though Marlowe had always been the truer part of me. Elena Marlowe, founder, chairwoman, divorcing wife, almost mother, daughter of a woman who told me never to let love make me homeless, and somehow still had to watch me learn the lesson in a skyscraper instead of a house. I did not cry while signing. I cried later in the car. That embarrassed me until I stopped trying to make grief logical. You can hate what someone did and still mourn who you thought they were. You can be relieved to escape and still feel the shape of the absence beside you. You can win the company, the case, the public story, and still sit alone in a parking garage with your forehead against the steering wheel because the man who betrayed you once knew how you took your coffee. Healing did not arrive like victory. It arrived like paperwork completed, one page at a time. At Marlowe Meridian, we rebuilt controls from the foundation up. No family exception policy. Independent review of executive spending. Vendor verification beyond relationship referrals. Conflict of interest reporting with anonymous escalation. Dual approval for sensitive accounts. Automatic audit triggers for classification changes. Stronger digital preservation protocols. Board education on reputational manipulation disguised as private concern. A rule written because of Julian that no executive could use personal family narratives to justify emergency governance changes without independent legal review. Celeste became interim CEO and later permanent CEO after telling me she would only accept if the board stopped treating charisma as a qualification. Owen received the cybersecurity budget Julian had denied and used the first slide of his training to say, "If you think fraud is not an IT issue, congratulations, you are the vulnerability." Nora started her own event crisis consulting firm after 3 companies called to ask how she had handled the gala. I invested. As for me, I remained chairwoman, but I stopped confusing endurance with duty. I took Fridays off for 3 months. The first Friday, I sat in my apartment and checked email every 7 minutes until my assistant threatened to change my passwords. The second Friday, I walked through Brooklyn and stood across the street from where my mother's brownstone had been. It had been renovated beyond recognition, painted dark green with brass numbers. A family with a stroller lived there now. That should have hurt. Instead, it comforted me. My mother's house had become my company. My company had survived. The home had become another home. Not every transformation was theft. Eventually, I took Grace's bracelet to my mother's grave. It was a cold morning, the kind where the sky looks like polished steel. I brought a new memory box, smaller than the first, made of walnut instead of linen. Inside, I placed the ultrasound photo, the hospital bracelet, Julian's old card after tearing off his signature, a letter to Grace, a note to my mother, and 1 page from the clawback agreement. Adrian thought that last part was odd when I told him. He did not say so directly, but I have known him long enough to recognize legal confusion disguised as silence. I included it because I wanted proof in the box that I had protected what mattered, not money, not shares, not reputation, boundaries, memory. The right to say this was mine, this was ours, this will not be used against me again. At the grave, I knelt and opened my palm. The bracelet caught the winter light. "Hi, Grace," I said. I had not spoken aloud to her in years. After the miscarriage, I spoke to her constantly because grief needs somewhere to go. Then I stopped because Julian said it worried him, because Margaret said it was unhealthy, because doctors said moving forward mattered, because the company needed me, because everyone had an opinion about how long a mother is allowed to love a child who never breathed. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry I let them touch your name." The cemetery wind moved through bare branches. Somewhere nearby, a groundskeeper's cart hummed softly. The world did not stop. It never does. That is both the cruelty and the mercy of it. "I got it back," I said. "I got you back as much as I could." I placed the bracelet in the box, closed the lid, and set it against my mother's stone for a few minutes. I imagined my mother sitting beside me, practical as ever, telling me to stop apologizing to the dead and start feeding the living. I laughed through tears because she would have said exactly that. I did not bury the box. I took it home. Some memories belong in the ground. Some need to live where you can protect them. People still ask me, in careful ways, whether I regret exposing Julian publicly. They expect a simple answer. Revenge stories are supposed to end with the villain ruined and the heroine smiling into a brighter life. Real life is messier. Public exposure protected the company because private confrontation would have given Julian time to finish framing me. The Gala was his chosen weapon. I turned it around because I had to. Do I regret the pain it caused? I regret that there was pain to reveal. I regret that employees had to watch leadership rot under chandeliers. I regret that an unborn child's existence became attached to scandal before she ever saw the world. I regret loving a man who learned my wounds well enough to aim. But I do not regret stopping him. For years, Julian told me I was too much, too driven, too controlled, too suspicious, too wounded, too cold. Margaret said I could build towers, but not a family. Bianca said I looked strong, as if strength were a consolation prize for being unloved. They all misunderstood the same thing. Strength was never the absence of softness. It was the decision not to let softness be used as evidence against me. I was soft when I sold my mother's home because I believed in a future I could not yet see. I was soft when I gave Julian a title because I loved him and wanted him to stand tall beside me. I was soft when I ordered a bracelet too early because hope had made me brave. I was soft when I ignored Margaret's cruelty because I wanted peace. I was soft when I kept loving Julian after the distance began because losing him felt like losing grace all over again. Then I became hard where I had to. Hard enough to call Adrian from a stairwell instead of screaming. Hard enough to lock down my shares while my hands shook. Hard enough to let Julian gather his audience. Hard enough to say Grace's name into a microphone. Hard enough to take a bracelet off a nursery wall without hating the baby in the crib that had not yet been used. Hard enough to sign divorce papers and cry later instead of begging earlier. Hard enough to rebuild a company without pretending betrayal was merely a personal inconvenience. The last time I saw Julian in person was not in court. It was in a courthouse hallway after a procedural hearing months later. He had lost weight, his suit hung differently, his hair had more gray at the temples. For a second, we were alone near a vending machine humming under fluorescent lights. No cameras, no lawyers within earshot, no Bianca, no Margaret, no board. "No, Elena," he said. I turned. He looked at me as if he expected something. Forgiveness, maybe. Rage, maybe. Proof that he still had access to some private room inside me. "I never thought you would actually destroy me," he said. That was when I understood he still did not understand anything. "I did not destroy you, Julian. I documented you." His mouth tightened. "You always need the last word." "No," I said. "I needed the truth. The last word is just cheaper." I walked away before he could answer. There are days I still miss the man from the beginning. The one in the badly altered suit. The one who spilled wine on himself and laughed. The one who brought deli sandwiches to my office and said my mother's sacrifice would mean something. I have learned not to argue with those memories. They are real, even if they were not complete. A person can have loved you once and still become someone who harms you. The beginning does not excuse the ending. The ending does not erase every tenderness that came before. It simply tells you which truth must guide your life now. My truth is this: Julian did not just cheat. He gave another woman my marriage, my money, my company, and the name of the child we never got to raise. He took my grief into meetings and turned it into strategy. He let his mother put my baby's bracelet on a registry. He taught his mistress to call theft legacy. He stood on a stage under flowers I paid for and tried to make my heartbreak look like instability. But he forgot one thing. I was not the woman standing behind his legacy. I was the woman who built it. And when I finally stopped protecting him from the truth, there was nothing left of his empire but invoices, recordings, and a nursery wall with the wrong name painted on it. The day after the final settlement was approved, I returned to headquarters before sunrise. I had not planned it. I woke at 4, made coffee, stared at the city, and felt pulled toward the building that had witnessed both the best and worst of my adult life. The lobby was dark, except for the security desk. The guard on duty, a retired cop named Angela, looked surprised to see me. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Not well." She nodded as if that explained everything. In New York, it usually does. I took the elevator to the executive floor. Julian's old suite had been emptied. The marble desk was gone. The magazine covers had been removed. The walls were patched but not yet painted. In the center of the room stood the door table from our first office. I had asked facilities to bring it out of storage after finding it during the renovation inventory. It looked ridiculous in that expensive suite, scarred and uneven, still resting on 2 refurbished filing cabinets because I had refused to let anyone replace them with legs. I ran my hand along the edge, where a coffee stain had darkened the wood years ago. That stain was from a night Julian and I had been too broke for takeout and too tired to go home. He had made instant coffee in a mug that said Brooklyn Dental Associates because the office used to belong to the dentist downstairs. I had spilled half of it across a proposal and started crying from exhaustion. Julian had kissed the top of my head and said, "One day this table is going to be in a room with a view." He was right. I hated that he was right. The view beyond the windows was magnificent. Dawn lifting slowly over glass towers, the East River catching a pale line of light, streets below beginning their daily argument, a city that never cared who betrayed whom as long as someone kept paying rent. I stood at that old door table and let myself remember the good without surrendering to it. That became one of my private measures of healing. In the beginning, every good memory felt like evidence for the defense. If I remembered Julian's kindness, I felt disloyal to my own pain. If I remembered his cruelty, I felt foolish for ever loving him. Eventually, I learned memory is not a courtroom. I did not have to prosecute every tender moment to justify leaving. I did not have to deny every tenderness to prove he was guilty. He was guilty because of what he did. The love that came before was simply part of what made the crime so intimate. Celeste found me there an hour later. "I thought I might find you here," she said, holding 2 coffees. "You tracked me?" "I know dramatic founder behavior when I see it." I accepted the coffee. "I am trying to decide what this room becomes. Not another CEO throne room, I hope." "No?" "Good. I already ordered smaller desks for the executive team floor. Anyone who wants a throne can buy one personally and disclose it." I smiled. "You are enjoying this." "I enjoy clean systems." She looked around the room. "Make it a training room." "For what?" "For every new executive. Bring them in here, show them the old table, show them the view. Tell them the company was built on one woman's inheritance, risk, and unpaid sleep. Then tell them what happened when someone mistook access for ownership." I looked at the door table again. That is very severe. Yes, she said. Put it in the culture deck. So we did. The room became the Marlowe room, though I objected to the name until everyone ignored me. The door table stayed at the center. New executives sat around it during orientation while Celeste explained financial controls, Owen explained digital accountability, and I explained the difference between trust and permission. Trust, I told the first group, is a relationship. Permission is a structure. Healthy organizations need both. If you ask for trust while resisting structure, you are not asking to be trusted. You are asking to be unobserved. No one took notes at first. Then everyone did. Outside the company, my life became quieter, not instantly peaceful. Quiet. There is a difference. Peace feels like rest. Quiet at first feels like the absence of noise you used to mistake for love. Julian's calls were gone. Margaret's insults were gone. Bianca's shadow was gone. The performance of being a powerful couple was gone. I no longer attended dinners where men asked Julian about deals I had structured, while their wives asked me whether I planned to slow down soon. I no longer sat in cars after events listening to Julian critique how much credit I had received. I no longer opened my closet and wondered whether my grief had been moved while I was not looking. The emptiness was enormous. I filled it slowly and not always gracefully. I bought flowers for myself every Sunday and then forgot to change the water. I tried pottery and made a bowl so ugly my assistant used it to hold paper clips. I accepted dinner invitations from friends I had neglected during years of crisis. I went to therapy and hated the first 3 sessions because the therapist kept asking where I felt things in my body, and I wanted to say, in the legal department. Eventually, I learned the answer was my throat, my jaw, and the hollow place below my ribs where I had stored every sentence I did not say. The therapist asked me once, "What would you have said to Julian if the company, the money, and the audience did not exist?" I thought about it for a long time. I would have asked why. I was so easy to punish. She waited. That was the question under all the evidence. Not why did he cheat, not why did he steal, not why Bianca, not why Grace. The deeper question was why the person who knew my pain most intimately decided that pain made me deserving of replacement. Why my strength became an insult. Why my success became a debt he believed I owed him. Why my body's loss became his permission. Therapy did not answer those questions. It helped me stop trying to answer them for him. Julian's reasons belonged to Julian. His insecurity, his entitlement, his resentment, his need to feel larger beside someone smaller, his mother's poison, his choices. I could examine them, document them, testify about them, but I could not cure them by understanding them. That had been the trap of our marriage. I kept believing if I understood his wound, I could stop him from using it as a weapon. But some people do not want healing. They want compensation. He wanted compensation for feeling overshadowed. So he billed my company, stole my grief, and called it legacy. One evening, almost a year after the gala, I received a package from an address I did not recognize. Inside was a handwritten note from Bianca. Adrian would have preferred she communicate only through counsel. I almost gave it to him unopened. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and read it. Elena, I know I do not deserve your time. I am not writing to ask forgiveness. I am writing because my daughter is old enough now to smile at lights, and every time she does, I think about what I almost let her inherit. Not money, not a name, a lie. I wanted to believe Julian chose me because I was special. The truth is uglier. He chose me because I made him feel unchallenged, and I like the power of being chosen. I knew enough to stop. I did not stop. I am sorry for the bracelet. I am sorry for the name. I changed hers before she was born. She has my grandmother's name now. I hope Grace's name is at peace with you. Bianca. I read it twice. Then I placed it in a folder marked closed correspondence and did not respond. Some apologies are real, some are useful, some are both. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not a door other people get to knock on whenever guilt makes them uncomfortable. It is a room inside you, and you decide who enters, when, and whether anyone enters at all. Bianca's apology did not erase what she had done, but it told me the baby no longer carried Grace's name. That was enough for me to sleep better that night. Margaret did not apologize. Of course she did not. Women like Margaret do not apologize because apology requires the admission that another person's pain is real. She moved from the estate after the asset review concluded it was recoverable under the proxy agreement and settlement structure. She gave an interview to a society blogger claiming she had been financially abused by a vengeful daughter-in-law. The article received modest attention until someone reposted the Gala clip of her calling me jealous of a real mother. The comments were not kind. I did not read them after the first 5 because watching strangers defend you can become its own unhealthy addiction. The estate sold in the spring. I directed my portion of recovered funds to a reproductive loss counseling program at a hospital in Brooklyn and to a legal aid fund for women leaving financially abusive marriages. I did it quietly, through the foundation, with no gala and no speech. When the foundation director asked what name to attach to the grant internally, I said, Grace, not Cross, not Marlowe, just Grace. There are names that should never have to carry a surname to matter. The 10th anniversary gala became a story people told in rooms where I was not present. I know, because versions came back to me distorted. In one version, I had hired a private investigator for years and planned the entire takedown like a movie villain. In another, Bianca went into labor on stage, which never happened. In another, Margaret fainted into the dessert table, which would have been satisfying, but also never happened. People prefer drama with clean images. A woman standing calmly with documents is not enough for them. They add shattered glasses, slap marks, screams, gowns, ambulances. The truth was quieter and worse. I stood there because if I did not, my husband would have turned my silence into consent. I revealed documents because if I only revealed pain, they would have called it hysteria. I said Grace's name because stolen things must be named before they can be returned. That is the part I tell other women now when they come to me privately, usually after panels or charity events, voices low, eyes scanning the room. They tell me about husbands who control accounts, partners who mock grief, family members who call them unstable when they set boundaries, executives who hide behind charm. They ask how I knew when to stop protecting him. I tell them I did not know all at once. I knew in pieces. I knew when the receptionist panicked. I knew when the office door was half open. I knew when he said, I thought I was still Mrs. Cross. I knew when he touched Bianca's stomach. I knew when he said Grace belonged to a baby who made it. I knew when the bracelet was gone. I knew when Margaret called theft legacy. I knew when the Gala program erased my name. I knew when he used my grief as evidence. I knew when the nursery wall welcomed home a child under a stolen name. I knew when he stood in my office destroying files and still thought my success was the crime. You do not have to wait for one perfect moment of certainty. Sometimes certainty is a collection of small betrayals finally heavy enough to become truth. One of the hardest days came during Julian's deposition. People imagine confrontation as dramatic because movies teach them that truth arrives with raised voices and slammed doors. In real legal rooms, truth arrives under fluorescent lights while a court reporter asks someone to spell their middle name. Julian sat at the far end of a conference table with his attorney beside him and a bottle of water he never opened. I was not required to attend for every minute, but Adrian told me there would be questions about Grace, the gala, and my leadership capacity. I chose to be there because I was tired of men discussing my wounds as if I had left them unattended in a public hallway. Julian looked at me only once when I entered. After that, he stared at the wood grain. His attorney tried to make the story smaller. He used phrases like personal lapse, emotional confusion, blurred reimbursement practices, informal family support, and private marital strain. Each phrase was an attempt to pour perfume over rot. Celeste answered financial questions with surgical calm. Owen answered technical questions with enough detail to make Julian's attorney regret asking. Nora described the secret program changes. Victor described the rides. Bianca's statement was read into the record in portions that made the room feel colder. Then they reached the name. Julian's attorney asked, "Isn't it true that Grace was a name Mr. Cross also had an emotional connection to?" Adrian's pen stopped moving. I felt every person at the table become still. Julian's attorney continued, "The name was selected by both spouses during the pregnancy, correct? So it would not be accurate to say as Marlowe had exclusive ownership over the word. There are legal strategies that are clever only if everyone involved has forgotten how to be human." Adrian looked at the opposing attorney and said, "Counsel, reconsider the phrasing." The man adjusted his glasses. "I am establishing that a name cannot be stolen." Before Adrian could respond, Julian spoke. "She made it untouchable," he said. His attorney turned sharply. "Julian." But the door had opened. Julian looked at me then. Really looked. Not with love. Not even hatred. With the exhausted resentment of a man who still believed his feelings were facts. After the miscarriage, everything became about what we lost. The bracelet, the box, the dates, the silence. I couldn't breathe in our home. Bianca made the name feel alive again. I waited for the old pain to swallow me. It came, but not as strongly as before. Maybe because I finally saw the shape of his cruelty without romance around it. He did not want Grace alive. He wanted a version of Grace that did not require him to face what he had failed to protect. A version attached to a woman who admired him and a child he could use as proof that nothing in him was broken. Adrian asked quietly, "Mr. Cross, did Ms. Marlowe give you permission to remove the bracelet from her private memory box?" "No." "Did she give your mother permission?" "No." "Did she give Bianca Vale permission to display it?" "No." "Did you know the bracelet was in Bianca Vale's nursery before the gala?" Julian's jaw worked. "Yes." "Did you instruct Miss Vale not to let Ms. Marlowe recover it?" His attorney objected. Adrian rephrased. The court reporter waited. Julian finally said, "I was trying to protect my daughter's future." Adrian did not raise his voice. "Which daughter, Mr. Cross?" The room went silent. Julian's face changed as if the question had struck him physically. For the first time, I saw something like shame. Not enough. Not cleansing. But enough to prove some buried part of him understood the obscenity of what he had done. He did not answer. That silence became part of the record, too. After the deposition, I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and shook so hard the metal door rattled. I was angry at myself for shaking. I had survived the gala, the condo, the board meeting, the storage unit, the office confrontation. I had spoken on stages and signed affidavits. And still, one question, which daughter, had opened a room inside me I thought I had sealed. A woman entered the bathroom while I was trying to steady my breathing. I recognized her shoes under the stall door, Nora's black flats, practical and scuffed at the toes. She did not knock. She simply stood at the sink and ran the water. "I am not going to ask if you are okay," she said. "That question is useless." I laughed through my nose, half a sob. She continued, I am going to stand here until you come out. And then we are going to get coffee from the terrible cart downstairs, because terrible coffee is better than being alone with good trauma. That was Nora. She could turn kindness into logistics. I came out after a minute. My face was blotchy. My hands were cold. Nora handed me a paper towel without comment. I keep thinking I should be over the shock, I said. Shock is not a calendar event. I hate that. Most true things are inconvenient. We bought terrible coffee. We drank it on a bench outside the courthouse while delivery trucks growled past and lawyers hurried by holding garment bags. Nora told me she had replayed the gala in her head 100 times, trying to find the exact moment she should have known. I told her that was a useless game. She told me I was playing the same one with my marriage. We sat there accusing each other of wisdom until both coffees went cold. That afternoon taught me something I did not like but needed. Surviving public betrayal does not mean you become invulnerable in private. Strength is not a permanent state. Some days it is a speech under chandeliers. Some days it is signing a legal document. Some days it is letting a friend stand outside a bathroom stall because your body remembered what your mind had already processed. I began letting people stand closer after that. Not many, not carelessly, but closer. Celeste came over one Sunday with soup when a headline reopened the story. Owen installed a better home security system and pretended it was a company requirement. Nora dragged me to a terrible comedy show where I did not laugh until the last 10 minutes and then laughed too hard at something not very funny. Adrian, who did not believe in emotional displays, sent me white tulips on Grace's due date without a card. He had done it once before in the hospital. This time, I did not throw them away because they hurt. I put them in water. I learned that being protected is not the same as being controlled. Julian had blurred that line until any concern felt like surveillance and any support felt like debt. Real protection did not ask me to shrink. It brought evidence, soup, flowers, passwords, coffee, and silence. It did not need to own the room to help me stand in it. On the second anniversary of the gala, Marlowe Meridian held a leadership summit in the same hotel ballroom. The board suggested another venue. I chose that one deliberately, not because I wanted to relive it, but because I refused to let a room become haunted by a man who no longer had power in it. There were no white orchids. I chose green branches and simple candles, no champagne tower, no sentimental slideshow. The event honored employees who had protected the company during the crisis. Celeste, Owen, Nora, the junior accountant, compliance staff, assistants who came forward, people whose names never appeared in articles but whose courage mattered more than any CEO portrait. At the end of the night, I stepped onto the stage. The last time I had stood there, my husband had tried to replace me. This time, I stood alone, not as a spectacle, but as myself. I used to believe legacy was what people said about you in rooms with chandeliers, I told them. Then I learned legacy is what survives when the chandelier light turns ugly. It is the policy someone follows when no one powerful is watching. It is the receipt someone saves because truth might need it later. It is the assistant who forwards the file, the CFO who trusts her suspicion, the IT director who preserves the log, the board member who asks one more question, the founder who finally stops confusing loyalty with silence. I looked out at the room. Some people knew exactly what I meant. Some only knew the public version. That was fine. Marlowe Meridian was built from a home my mother left me. For a long time, I thought that meant I had turned private love into public work. Now, I think it means the work must be worthy of the love that funded it. No company is worth a person's dignity. No leader is above documentation. No family name is more important than the truth. And no legacy built on theft deserves to stand. They applauded, not wildly, not like scandal, like people agreeing to remember. After the summit, I went home, took off my earrings, and opened the walnut memory box. Grace's bracelet lay inside beside the ultrasound and the letter. I touched it gently. "Good night," I said. It no longer felt like apology. It felt like care. That is the ending I trust most. Not Julian's indictment, not the settlement, not Margaret leaving the estate, not Bianca changing the baby's name, not the company surviving. Those things mattered, but they were external. The real ending came in a quiet apartment when I could touch my child's bracelet without feeling it had been contaminated forever. When Grace's name belonged to love again, not strategy. When my mother's warning no longer sounded like prophecy, but protection. Never let love make you homeless. I used to think she meant money, houses, deeds, bank accounts, and yes, she meant those too. But now I know she also meant the home inside yourself, the place where your memories live, the place where your dignity sits down at the end of the day, the place where your grief can be safe without being used as leverage, the place where your name is not rewritten by someone else's hunger. Julian tried to evict me from that place. He failed, because the home my mother built in me was older than my marriage, stronger than his lies, and protected by a woman who finally understood that love without boundaries is not devotion. It is an unlocked door. I locked the door. In the morning, sunlight came through the curtains and touched the walnut memory box on my dresser. Nothing dramatic happened. No music, no revelation, no perfect forgiveness. Just light, ordinary, and patient, resting on the place where I had put what they tried to steal. For once, ordinary felt like mercy, and for the first time in years, I slept.